Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has taken his diplomatic training wheels off, emerging from a 40-minute sit-down with the Chinese president, all smiles.
Xi Jinping praised New Zealand as a friend and partner, and while Chris Hipkins didn't go that far, he said the meeting was warm. Political editor Jen Lynch is in Beijing.
The grandeur of the Great Hall of the People in all of its glory. God defend New Zealand echoing across the vast marble as China and New Zealand walked in step to inspect the Guard of Honour. Before Chris Hipkins was showered with compliments by his Chinese counterpart, Premier Li Qiang.
Mr. Prime Minister, you are young and capable statesman of New Zealand.
The final meeting in the trilogy of the top of the Chinese Communist Party. He's getting quite used to the place.
Did you feel comfortable in there?
Yes.
In the Great Hall of the People?
Well, it's certainly a formidable building, you know, but I certainly didn't feel the conversation was uncomfortable in any way.
Comfortable with one of the world's most powerful men.
I'm very pleased to meet you.
President Xi Jinping visibly pleased to have Hipkins here, trumpeting the strength of the relationship.
Our relationship has remained robust and strong.
And dubbing us pals and partners.
China always views New Zealand as a friend and a partner.
Hipkins initially hesitant to herald the Chinese as friends.
It's an international partnership.
So you will say that China is a friend and a partner?
Well, it depends on the context, but yes, by and large.
Hipkins coy on whether that Biden comment about Xi being a dictator came up.
It's a question really to, you know, for them to address. I did not raise it.
But he seemed to get on rather well with Xi, despite worries he might get a dressing down.
It was a warm and constructive meeting.
Did you have any robust conversations at all?
We canvassed all of the issues that a New Zealand Prime Minister visiting Beijing would canvass. The meeting was at no point adversarial.
A relief given the topics on the table.
The relationship between China and the US was discussed. The situation in Ukraine was discussed. The Pacific was discussed. Human rights were discussed.
Though Hipkins admitting he didn't push that hard on human rights abuses against the Uyghur population in Xinjiang.
It wasn't discussed in great depth. So I referenced New Zealand's position.
Upsetting for Uyghur Solidarity Aotearoa, which says that shows Hipkins has a total lack of moral compass.
To hear and see Chris Hipkins say nothing about it when he is there in China, that's disturbing.
The PM's argument for broad brush is that the real meat comes during his meeting with Chinese Premier Li, his counterpart in the Chinese system.
He should have relayed New Zealand's profound concerns, and in particular he should have asked for Xi Jinping's response.
In the end, it ended up being around 40 minutes. So there's a limit to the amount of progress you can make on any issue.
A limit to the influence tiny New Zealand can have with this vast superpower.
Our Jenna joins us now live from Beijing. Jenna, would you say the trip so far has been a success?
Yeah, despite Chris Hipkins saying he was comfortable in that magnificence of a building, you could see that he was a little bit awestruck today by all of the pomp and pageantry, perhaps pinching himself a little bit that it was all in honour of him. Now, I've just run outside from a media conference. Chris Hipkins has just wrapped talking about the meeting he had with Premier Li. He said that they did focus on economics again, but he was able to go into more detail about New Zealand's position on human rights, specifically naming our concerns around Xinjiang and Hong Kong. He also said that they spoke in more detail about the US-China relationship. This is Chris Hipkins' first big test on the international stage, and while he's still a bit wobbly with some of the more difficult diplomatic questions, those conversations that are happening in really coded language, you would have to say this has been a success so far. It is a really big deal for him to secure those 3 big meetings with the Chinese leadership just 5 months into his role, and by all of the grins he was getting from the Chinese leadership, you would have to say they are pleasantly surprised and pleased that he's prioritised them as well.
Jenna Lynch there live from Beijing. Tēnā koe.